Well, welcome everyone. My name is Katherine Kratky, and I am the regent for the Washington, Missouri Daughters of the American Revolution, and our chapter is called Valley of the Merrimack. In this particular organization, we have local chapters, which are a part of state chapters, which are a part of national. So when you join one, you join them all. And then the other organization that does that is the real estate, realtors. So when you join the local, you also join the state and you join the national as well. It is my pleasure to be here tonight to talk to you guys about my favorite subject, which is women with a purpose, the Daughters of the American Revolution. So a little clarification first. I will throughout this presentation refer to Daughters of the American Revolution as DAR, never to be called DARE. And Sons of the American Revolution as SAR, never to be SARE. They'll get their hackles up. So, if you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll be happy to answer them along the way, or you can hold them until the end, whichever you prefer. And or if you want to send me private questions later, you can pull my brochure and just grab my email and send me something that way as well. A little bit about me. I have been with the Valley of the Merrimack for a little over 3 years. Almost 4, and I have been the regent for the last 2 sessions, which is a 2-year term. So the ladies love the fact that I'm a little bit younger than the average, and it didn't matter that I still work, and they don't. But this is what they always say: if you want something done, give it to a busy woman. All right, we shall begin with a little bit of history so that you guys know how this developed and where it came about. So throughout the early centuries of time, history has recorded but few women. They were limited to being found in the Bible or as mythical goddesses or in history books as queens of countries. These women were either born into humble surroundings or one of royal descent, but all were chosen to make a profound mark in history. They were clearly all women with a purpose. By comparison, today's woman is educated, accomplished, and informed. She is a person of determination. She chooses her field of dreams and aims high. The Daughters of the American Revolution are all women with a purpose. We strive for leadership which motivates, inspires, and brings out the very best in each individual member. Now, the date of the founding of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution is officially October 11th, 1890. And the 4 women officially recognized as the founders are Miss Mary Dacia, Miss Eugenia Washington, Mrs. Mary Smith Lockwood, and Mrs. Ellen Harding Walworth. Miss Dacia had been teaching school in Alaska, but was, in 1890, actually an employee of the federal government in Washington. Now, Miss Washington was a great-grandniece of President George Washington and was also an employee of the federal government in 1890. Mrs. Lockwood was a writer, and Mrs. Walworth was a lawyer. Mrs. Lockwood and Mrs. Walworth were both widows by this time. These 4 women had the vision to found the society and founded it on such firm principles that they are as valid today as they were in 1890. As you journey back with me more than a century and a quarter, I hope you will find their story as fascinating as I did. On July 4th, 1876, on the centennial celebration day of the birth of our nation, there was organized in San Francisco a society called Sons of the Revolutionary Sires. The Sons of the American Revolution claim descent from this particular organization today, although SAR was not officially organized until 1889 in the long room of Francis Tavern in New York. This is the same room where General George Washington bade farewell to the officers of his army on December 3rd, 1781. The next year, April 30th, 1890, the Sons of the American Revolution met in Louisville, Kentucky, and considered admitting women to their society. But the idea was voted down. There were a few other patriotic societies to which men could belong, and that summer, one called Sons of the Revolution met in Washington. Their meeting was written up in the Washington Post. One of the women who read this article was Mary Smith Lockwood, the writer. Now, she felt, like many other women of her time, that exclusion of women from a patriotic society was not only discrimination against all of the women, but also failure to honor properly the heroic women of the Revolution. She called it one-sided patriotism. And she wrote an article for the Washington Post in which she told the story of Hannah Thurston Arnett, who was living in Elizabethtown, New Jersey during the desperate days of December 1776. And when her husband and a group of his townsmen were considering accepting the British offer of amnesty, Hannah called them would-be traitors and threatened to leave her husband if he deserted the cause. She thus renewed their patriotism. Mrs. Lockwood declared in this article that the name of Hannah Thurston Arnett was not on any honor roll. Interestingly, a man who read Miss Lockwood's article was Mr. William O. McDowell of Newark, New Jersey, who was the great-grandson of Hannah Thurston Arnett, and also happened to be the Register General for the Sons of the American Revolution. He, answering the letter, was published in the newspaper on July 21st, 1890. He wrote that he had been thinking about a patriotic society for women for a long time and offered to help in founding of a society of the daughters of the American Revolution. In this particular article, he appealed to every woman who has the blood of heroes in her veins to send him her name and address. 6 women in the Washington area answered Mr. McDowell's appeal, of whom Miss Mary Dacia and Miss Eugenia Washington were 2. Miss Dacia wrote to Mr. McDowell and asked his advice on how to go about organizing. He suggested that a meeting be called and that the women who had written him be invited. Miss Dacia also wrote to Miss Lockwood. They met and discussed the possibility of such a society. The names of the other interested women were added to the list, and Miss Dacia wrote to all of them, telling them of the meeting to be held July 29th at the home of Miss Louise Brown. Only 5 women were present at this meeting. One of the 5 who had written Mr. McDowell and Mrs. Walworth was Mrs. Wolfe. And Mrs. Brown was the hostess at this particular event. Now, Mrs. Lockwood could not be there because she was, like most women in our organization, busy helping elsewhere. She happened to be helping get ready for the Chicago Fair. Because so few were present, they decided to put off formal action until fall, and Miss Dacia so informed Mr. McDowell. Well, he replied immediately, urging the women to take immediate action. He also sent application blanks with the word sons scratched out and daughters handwritten in, a proposed constitution, and a bound book for the amended and accepted constitution. When these were received, another meeting was called for August 9th at the Langham Hotel where Mrs. Walworth lived. Unfortunately, just at the time set for the meeting, there was a terrific thunderstorm with rivers of rain, so there were only 3 present: Dacia, Washington, and Walworth. These 3 made important decisions, though. They decided that the DAR would be a national organization with chapters in every state. They named a board of managers with Miss Dacia a member. They decided on who was going to be secretary, who was going to be registrar. Then they recognized Mrs. Walworth and Mrs. Lockwood for their contributions in organizing through their writing efforts, which would follow through the Washington Post. During the rest of that summer, application blanks were sent out, letters were written, friends were contacted, and preparations were made for a very large meeting to be held at Strathmore Arms in Washington on October 12, 1890. This date was chosen not only because it was the 400th year anniversary of Columbus sighting America, but also because a woman, Isabella of Spain, was willing to pawn her jewels to make it happen. It was then found that October 12th fell on a Sunday. Lack of planning. So the date was changed to October 11th. Now, one of those applications was sent to Carolyn Scott Harrison. Does that sound familiar to anyone? She was the wife of the then President of the United States, Benjamin Harrison. I have seen a list of the United States presidents who have been members of the Sons of the American Revolution. And I'm going to take just a minute here to tell you who those were. They were Dwight Eisenhower, Rutherford Hayes, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, and Lyndon Johnson. They all had grandfathers that were Revolutionary War patriots. President Benjamin Harrison's name is not on the list, but it could have been. He was the grandson of William Henry Harrison, our 9th president. This is the only instance in our history of a grandfather and grandson both being president. President William Henry Harrison was the grandson of Benjamin Harrison, who signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, at 11 o'clock on the morning of October 11th, 1890, Miss Harrison left the White House in the carriage newly presented to her by the president. She sent her niece, who was with her, into the Strathmore Arms to ask Mrs. Lockwood how much of her genealogy would actually be needed for membership to this particular organization. She was told that she only needed to go back to her Revolutionary War ancestor, and this is still true today. Mrs. Lockwood then asked Mrs. Harrison to accept the presidency of the new organization. When Mrs. Harrison spoke of her duties as First Lady, she was assured that someone else would discharge the heavy duties of the presidency. Mrs. Harrison then consented to have her name put in nomination, but only if her choice was unanimous, and it was. Also at this meeting, the threefold purpose of Daughters of the American Revolution one historical, to perpetuate the memory and spirit of the men and women who achieved American independence. Educational, to carry out the injunction of Washington in his farewell address to the American people, to promote as an object of primary importance institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge, thus developing an enlightened public opinion. And 3, to cherish, maintain, and extend the institutions of American freedom, to foster true patriotism and love of country, and to aid in securing for mankind all the blessings of liberty, was adopted and stands unaltered today. At the time of organizing the society, many questions had to be answered. Number 1, who can join? Is this another aristocracy? Do I have to be rich? These questions were answered in the social column of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And it stated, it is not for the aristocracy, but to honor the men who carried the muskets and the boys who beat the drums and fifed Yankee Doodle for liberty, to honor the women who served the country in their home while their men were fighting the battles for freedom. 1 year later, on October 1891, there were 818 members. 800 more than the 18 who had joined that first year. Today, our members are in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and overseas. All over the world, in large cities and little towns, you will find Daughters of the American Revolution. Currently, 3 buildings are owned by the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and they form the largest group of buildings in the world maintained exclusively by women. The 3 buildings fill a city block near the White House. The ladies were smart where they bought their property. The buildings are Memorial Continental Hall, Constitution Hall, and the Administration Building. The ground was broken for the first building, Memorial Continental Hall, in 1902. The price paid for the land was $1.25 per square foot. This building is now the Daughters of the American Revolution Library. On April 14, 1904, the cornerstone of Memorial Continental Hall was laid. The cornerstone bearing an inscription, a tribute to the patriots who achieved American independence. The spade that was used to break the ground on this hall was also used by George Washington to break ground for the United States Capitol. And this spade is now in the DAR Museum. The membership of DAR grew so rapidly that soon Memorial Continental Hall, which only had 2,000 seats, couldn't seat the delegates to the annual DAR convention and Congress. And in 1929, Constitutional Hall, seating twice that number, was completed. And Mrs. Calvin Coolidge assisted in laying that cornerstone. This building has been placed on the roll of National Historic Landmarks as a significant representative of our nation's heritage. The administration building between the 2 halls has been enlarged several times to accommodate the continued growth of DAR. When we consider the almost 200,000 present members and remember the 18 women who met on October 11th, 1890, we realize the truly phenomenal growth of the Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Why do we say women of purpose? We are women of patriotism. We are the women who not only helped achieve American independence during the American Revolution in the 1700s, but continue to help fight for our freedom and those of other countries into the 21st century. History has recorded radical changes in life, from the days of the Mayflower to the American Revolution to the days of the Civil War, and through these crises to the world wars and on to the present day. We need no reminder of what we have accomplished. Victories alone are the documentation to the spirit of our goals. We are women in education. As an educational society, there is work for every single member. Each year, our members worldwide give thousands of dollars to scholarship funds and educational committees in schools. The education of our youth is America's main industry, and the youth of our household must be energized to the possibilities that await them. The maintenance of the highest standards in education is everyone's patriotic duty. As long as we can remember, women have, in one way or another, been united in educating our country with strong purpose of mind, to show strength, love, and a legacy of courage by women with a goal, women with a purpose. We are women in medicine. The medical field is well represented. The DAR helped to found the Army Nurses Corps. Our members also volunteer for many hours every year in veterans hospitals and nursing homes. Clara Barton, the founder of the American Red Cross, was elected Surgeon General of the DAR at the organizing meeting in 1890. We think also of daycare centers as a recent event brought on by today's parents working too much. But did you know that DAR had one of the first daycare centers ever? During World War II, a day nursery was operated in 4 rooms in the basement of Constitution Hall for children of enlisted men whose wives were now working. We are women in historic preservation. Across the country, our members have erected many monuments, statues, and plaques, participated in local history fairs, and assist schools with history projects. Our members march in parades, participate in patriotic observances, and contribute thousands of dollars each year to support the many DAR projects. They volunteer to welcome new citizens, give flags, honor outstanding citizens for their service in their communities, preserve historic sites, promote conservation, and I could go on and on and on, but I won't. As daughters of the American Revolution, we work hard to never lose sight of our goals. America, our nation, the Constitution, our law, Old Glory, our flag, the home, our refuge, the school, our defense against illiteracy, the higher power, our inspiration, armed forces, our national defense. Our strength is through unity of purpose. All right, guys. If you have any questions at this time, please feel free to answer them. Like I said, once again, you guys can just email me. Our chapter is out of Washington, Missouri, and we work and assist in quite a few local towns from Pacific to St. Clair. We also do some work down in St. James at the Veterans Home there. So our members are from all of those different communities and areas. I want to thank everybody who's here tonight. And that's all that I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Why do you hear more about the daughters of the Revolution than the sons?
Do what?
Why do you hear more about the daughters of the
You mean in society today as general?
Yeah.
Well, because the women tend to be more encouraged to be out there. They like it to be in other groups of women, and they talk. Women talk. Women like to talk. They love to visit. Sometimes men tend to be a little more close to the chest about the things that they're involved in. But most of the people that are drawn to these organizations are genealogy nuts. It took me 20 years to get back far enough to my Revolutionary War ancestor. And I didn't have any help, and I did it, just as a hobby. So there's some of these people that are pretty intense about this. So, and the Sons of the American Revolution, they do a lot of work as well. I'm not familiar with as many organizations that they're involved in, but women are better at multitasking. So if the men are working normal jobs, it's kind of hard for them. So I have noticed that. But anyway,
Isn't there many, many more associations that men have developed? American Legion, Veterans of
Right.
Foreign War, Shriners, etc., that they can join, other than the organizations that women have.
right. And there's an organization out there for just about everything. So there's organizations for both men and women for if you have a Civil War veteran in your history lineage, all the way back to my last project, which is now in its second year, is getting enough evidence to prove that I have a Jamestown grandfather. So what happens is, for women, if you're trying to prove lineage through a woman and you get back to the Civil War and beyond, women were property. It is very, very difficult to find proof of life, proof of death, proof of anything that they did, because everything was connected to their husbands. So unless they were named specifically in a will, which is what you hope for, then you're going to have, it's going to be difficult. So I have one lady smack dab in the middle between me and Jamestown that I cannot find proof of her marriage and name change, which is then on the will document, is in the married name. So it gets to be really, really difficult. And now the latest thing coming on board is a lot about DNA and how people want to start being able to prove their lines through DNA. It's, for these organizations, it's still in its infancy. But it has the potential that you could take a DNA test and put it in the computer, and someday it might just go phoom, and just line it all out for you, which seems a little unfair for those of us who've been at it decades. But I kind of have an idea that that's kind of where it is headed. I know Daughters of the American Revolution, we have people in each chapter that are available to assist people with their paperwork. So if we have ladies that have it started and they're stuck, we have what we call our chapter registrar, and she's the one that fills out all the necessary papers that have to be turned into national for approval to prove the lineage. And we actually have several patriots now that we have big X's on. People have gotten into the organization under this patriot or that patriot only when they went back and looked at the documents. And the documentation, it's not there. It's not complete. So in order for somebody to come in on that particular patriot, they would have to go back and they'd have to find the irrefutable proof. So it's interesting.
My fifth great grandfather was in the Revolutionary War, and he was 100. He lived to be 106. At 101 he crossed from Virginia over into Kentucky, but he was one of the first people to receive a pension from being a Revolutionary War soldier.
Fantastic. They had a hard time getting their pensions.
Yeah, he had to have people write letters and stuff to prove that to say lieutenant.
Right. And as of right now, the National Archives is asking for volunteers to help transcribe documents. They still have stacks and stacks of Revolutionary War era documents that have not been transcribed, and they've sort of hit a panic button because these documents are all in cursive. And the number of people who can read cursive are getting fewer and fewer and fewer. So there has been a call that's gone out recently from the National Archives for anybody who's willing to even just sign on and take one document, take one letter, and transcribe that for them and get it turned in. And of course, all of us genealogists, we are hoping that there's pension documents in there that will have those letters, because the letters of explanation that they submitted with their pension applications give so much intimate information about what they experienced, what battles they were in, because Revolutionary War patriots they would go in for short periods of time. And then they would go in and they would sign up again, and they might be in a completely different regiment. They might be, spend a year in the cavalry and then come back and be in the infantry in a different. And it's difficult when you get into Revolutionary War documents and you're researching them, because they flop around all over the place. So mine was a captain in a militia group that was, credited with X, Y, and Z, and then he spent a year and a half as a private in an actual official capacity unit. So it's people can get real confused real fast. But anybody who's willing to transcribe for the National Archives right now, they're begging. So it's volunteer work, but for organizations and people who have members such as we do, our members are requested to do so many hours of volunteer work every year. The chapter that I'm a part of has a little less than 50 members. Our goal this year we were given was 1,432 hours, and I'm happy to say that we tripled that this year. And we only actually have about 25 members that do most of the work. We do have quite a few members that are elderly and they just physically can't, so they do what work they can from home. But that's over 4,000 hours of volunteer work out of about 25 women. So we have some that have been very involved in honor flight, which they assist the honor flight in taking any veteran living today who wants to go to Washington. They will take them for free to Washington at no charge. The honor flight out of Franklin County has ceased its operations as of the first of the year. They didn't have anyone left to take. There are other organizations in the state that are part of the honor flight. So if you know of someone who maybe got missed, who or was not well and is well now and might want to go, the SEMO, the Southeast Missouri Honor Flight, is still in operation, so we can get you down to them. But they did have a requirement that required COVID-19 shots and boosters and all that kind of stuff. So there was a bunch of people that did not get to go because they were not medically strong enough to have the shots, or they didn't want them or whatnot. So anyway, any other questions?
I have a question for, do you know if your fifth grandfather was paid his pension in land, or was he paid in some other form? Because I have read that much of the pensions were paid in land.
Yeah, the government
They-
didn't have actual
Government
funds.
had lots of land.
Well, it says Revolutionary War pension and bounty land. So you got both, it sounds like. This article that I found about him said at the age of 101, he drew a pension of $120 for his 3 years of military service for an annual allowance of $40.
That's fantastic. A lot of men, some of them had a choice. They could take the money or they could take land.
And I assume that's why he went to Kentucky, because he got the land in Kentucky.
It's why a lot of people went that initial push after the Revolutionary War to go west, because they were given thousands of acres. The government had nothing but land. They didn't have any money. They didn't have finances, and they were not the most stable thing for a while. So, anyway, they weren't printing money yet.
You had a question. I'm sorry, Dan.
No, I didn't.
No, I thought you did.
I did. You said you did projects. You worked with Honor Flight. What else? What did your 4,000 hours consist of?
Well, a couple of our big activities, we put on a wheelchair poker run at St. James Veterans Home. So when it's not nice, we set it up inside the facility where we have tables, and instead of, like a man getting in a car and going from this bar to that bar to that bar, we have tables set up. So it's the same game, and then on different years we've had motorcycle groups that volunteer to come in and actually push the veterans. So they come in their motorcycle, bandanas and gears, and the guys really get a kick out of that. We assist with bingo. They also do bingo at the Veterans Home. And what we do is we go out and get donations for prizes and giveaways and, things to help the men stay engaged and stay bright and stay active. And if none of you have ever been to St. James facility, it is absolutely fantastic. It is one of the best I've ever been in. I was very, very impressed from the very first moment I ever walked in there. Another big project that we do, our chapter was the first organization in Franklin County to adopt a cemetery for the Wreaths Across America program. And that is something that is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger every year. We now have 2 cemeteries, and the Wreaths Across America is about acquiring money or donations to purchase a wreath to be placed on each veteran's grave in a particular cemetery. In our case, we coordinate and have the junior ROTC group out of St. Clair come in and assist us. Crestview Cemetery down near Lone and area and just outside of St. Clair. There's 211 veterans in that particular cemetery. So the junior ROTC kids come in. They get their volunteer hours for helping us. And it gives us an opportunity to work with them, teach them. And then I have a group of American Heritage Girls, which is the break-off group from the Girl Scouts. So when the Girl Scouts decided they weren't going to do God in their program anymore, and they were going to possibly allow boys, there was a huge splinter group with the Girl Scouts that wanted to stay original to the original mottos, the original aspect of having an organization for the little girls. And they are now called the American Heritage Girls. So those particular girls, we have a huge troop that comes and helps us out of South County with the Bethel Church Cemetery. And there's 41 graves there in that particular cemetery. And I'm happy to say the last 2 years we've been able to raise enough funds to cover all of those particular graves. And this happens in December. It is very cold, usually. So we work with either the St. Clair VFW or the American Legion on acquiring one of their halls. And then after the event, we bring all the kids back to the hall and load them up with hot chili and hot chocolate and, apple pie. And we get everybody all warmed up before we send them on and send them home. So that's one of our biggest projects of the year. But we do lots and lots of little things too. So one of the ladies in our group, she is the national chairperson for the Military Overseas Baby Blanket Project. And that particular project is designed to collect baby blankets, and then what they do is receive requests from active military. Say there's a base in Hawaii and there's 3 young ladies that are either military themselves or they are the spouses of military, and they're going to have a baby. And a lot of times these bases will put on a joint shower for the women, and then they'll put in a request for homemade baby blankets, which our members all across the world donate, send here to Missouri to the national leader, which is a member of our chapter, and then she packages them and distributes them as the requests come in. So that would be like Hawaii, or it could be a military base in Germany or whatnot. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. We do conservation projects. Lots of chapters have bigger numbers to work with, but we work with what we have, so we try to get creative. So for our conservation project this year, our motto was repurpose or reuse or recycle. And we put ourselves together, and we collected together an entire pickup truck load full of items, which were donated to the Agape House here in Pacific, that were recycled and then either bought to repurpose or reuse. And so we take the theme and we adjust it to what we have access to and do the very best that we can. The St. Louis Jefferson chapter, which may have somewhere between 250 and 300 members, they have more manpower and more financial power to do bigger and more splashy things. But bigger and splashy doesn't necessarily mean that it impacts the community like what we're doing.